Good evening, folks. Mrs. Parsons here again with the West Platte Elementary 6th grade math update. We're going to be talking today about the concept that is our new Missouri Learning Standard for really about a week or so. We're going to go through it for not very long. We've been going quite extensively through our other concepts, so this one should be a shorter concept, a week or two, and we'll be taking a test over our rational numbers unit. It's our last unit in the number system for the state of Missouri, which talks about number sense. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what rational numbers are. That way you can talk to your students about it. Rational numbers are positive and negative numbers. And so when you think about rational numbers, students that you have only been dealing with anything to what we call the right of a number line, the right of zero, all positive numbers. Well, now in the 6th grade, we're going to add negative numbers to that. And they're going to be the same numbers that they've already been using. Whole numbers, which now, since they can be positive and negatives, we're going to call them integers. Decimals, which they've already been using, but now we're going to make them positive and negative. And fractions, which they've already been using, but we're now going to make them positive and negative. This is a family of rational numbers. Whole numbers, decimals, and fractions, but now they're positive and negatives. And we're going to talk about those in the sense of a number line. Your students know what a number line is. They've probably been working on one since at least one of the students told me today 2nd grade, but I think it might have been 1st grade. But we'll go 2nd grade. So 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, they've been working on a number line. So a lot of times once they get to me in 6th grade, they don't need to see it as much, but I go ahead and put it up for them. So here's a typical number line that your students are used to. We call this a horizontal number line, meaning going with the horizon, left to right, going across. And then there's also a vertical number line, one that goes up and down, of course, with our positive being up or negatives being down, kind of like a thermometer that you would look at when you're taking temperature. And then, of course, our horizontal number line, our positives to the right, our negatives to the left. Well, your students have been doing this for I don't know how many years, at least 3 or 4 years, where they've looked at a number line and they've located numbers. And if you recall, and you've got my newsletter, which I send out weekly, these are the standards, the I can statements that we're going to work on with rational numbers. I can represent and write rational numbers. I can locate rational numbers. I can compare and order rational numbers. I can tell the distance a rational number has on a number line from 0. I can then graph rational numbers on a coordinate plane. All those parents, they have done, and they will tell you they have done those with positive numbers, whole numbers, decimals, and fractions. The only difference is now we're going to add in negative numbers with that. So that's what we're talking about right now this week. Positive and negative, decimals and fractions, because we already did integers last week. These are the whole numbers. That's what they're used to. So we're adding decimals and fractions. So a few things I want you to know, if they haven't told you, I say it before. Like Buzz Lightyear, numbers will go to infinity and beyond. All the way to the right, all the way to the left. To my right are always positives, to my left are negatives. Positives are always up, negatives are always down. Because eventually in the 6th grade, we are going to work on a coordinate grid, and that's where the two number lines come together. Right now, we're just working on locating rational numbers and placing them on a coordinate grid or just a number line, because we're going to get to this later. And then we're comparing and ordering these rational numbers. So your students are going to be bringing home homework with things like this. First thing, hey, if I had the number 7, what's the opposite of 7? Well, hopefully, parents, you all know there's an opposite to every number. So if that's 7, my opposite is negative 7. That's whole numbers. Pretty easy to tell a student that. But when it gets to this, what's the opposite of a negative half? Well, if I can put a negative half on a number line, which would be located right about there, there is 0. That's our origin where we always start. I'm going to go halfway between 0 and a negative 1. That's my negative half. Well, what's the opposite of that on my positive side of the number line? Well, it would be a positive 1/2. And we're also going to do that with decimals. 75/100ths. Where would that be located on a number line? Well, typically your student can break up a number line. That's where sometimes they have difficulty. If I want to break up this number line and I want to represent 75/100ths, I have to know how many spots I want to put in between where that falls. Well, I know that has to fall in between 0 and 1 on the positive side of the number line, because 75/100ths is not a whole yet. So I look at this, and usually the number line is marked for them, but if it's not, then they're going to have to mark it. Well, I know 75/100ths is the same as 3/4. So I can break up between 0 and 1 into fours. There is 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, and 4/4 is equal to 1. Stuff that we learned in the last 2 units, fractions and decimals. So if I want to know the opposite of 75/100, it's a positive. If there's no sign, it means it's positive. If there's a negative sign, it means it's a negative. So the opposite of 75/100 is a negative 75/100. Well, here's the positive 75/100, because I know 1/4, 2/4, 3/4 is 75/100. Well, then the opposite of it would be a negative 75/100 on the opposite side of the number line. That's what the opposite means. And this is what we're doing right now. Just locating these numbers on a number line, placing these numbers on a number line, and then we're looking at them. An example we had today was I have the numbers -1, -5/6, and 0. And someone's going to ask me either put those in order to greatest to least or least to greatest. I'm going to do greatest to least. Why am I going to do that? Because most students look at these numbers and go, well, that's the greatest. Well, why do they say that? Because 1 is the biggest number. But this little thing right there tells me it doesn't have as great as value. So my first greatest number, if I'm going to number these greatest to least, is 0. Because even though 0 has no value and there's nothing to it, it's still my greatest because at least I'm neutral. I'm at nothing. So if I want to go to my next greatest number, I'm going to put a -5/6. Now, it's not great. It's got a negative. But it is, to this, greater than this -1, which is where I'm going to put this at the end. This has the greatest value, which doesn't have any value at all, but that's okay. Then this, and I'm probably saying that, I want to make sure I say that right. This is greater than that, -5/6. It's not a whole yet. And this is greater than that -1. The bigger the negatives get, the worse off you are. So you always want to start with your positives and work your way, when you're going greatest to least, you want to work your way to your larger negatives because they're worth less. Not this. Something's worthless. It is worth less. Not as much value. 2 words, not the compound word. And of course, if I want to go least to greatest, then I want to start with my largest negatives and go to my largest positives. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're working on this evening or this week. I'm going to keep making more videos, put another one up tomorrow. If you have any questions, please call Mrs. P, email me, have your students ask me questions. I want to help them as much as I can understand mathematics, and the only way I can do that is if I know they have questions. So please reach out to me. Other than that, have another great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow on another episode of Updates with Mrs. P in Mathematics. Have a great night.